I'm the Director of Development here at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. And I've also been serving as a strategic planning facilitator with the Documentary Heritage and Preservation Services for New York. And in fact, this is one of the DHPSNY, we call ourselves DHPSNY. This is one of the DHPSNY webinars. And I think I did the very first DHPSNY webinar back in last September, nearly a year ago, on fundraising. And I'm sharing today's, I'm one of two presenters for Spreading the Word. I'm here with Amy Heuer, who is our Manager of Marketing and Engagement at the Conservation Center. And she'll be presenting the second half of the webinar. She's much more familiar with the technical details and the actual day-to-day work of practicing the art of spreading the word. I'll be handling the first half with more of a general overview, the theoretical foundation for thinking about promotion, and some, hopefully some inspirational ideas. This webinar is, technically speaking, for the collecting institutions of New York State as a project of DHPSNY. And I've drawn several examples. We've both drawn several examples from institutions in the state, but just by its nature, this material is as applicable for, say, an academic library in Texas or even a municipal archive in Iceland as it is for a museum archive or historical society in New York State. In our new 21st century world of marketing and promotion, the playing field has really been radically leveled. Ultimately, when you're dealing with the new world of marketing here, electronic marketing, everyone gets the same frame of space to work with on Facebook, and everyone's limited to 140 characters on Twitter when you go to post something. So, and that's whether you are an all-volunteer historical society or the Metropolitan Museum of Art. When you're looking at the computer, you're basically looking at the same acreage to work in, the same frame to work in. And with these new tools that are available now to us, suddenly we're all capable of creating fascinating online communities that bring people together with common interests, that bring people together with common interests from all over the world. As we go along, I think everybody knows the chat box, but as we go along regarding questions, both Amy and I will have time at the end to respond to questions, but just feel free to use the chat box on the side of your screen as we present, either posing questions to us, to Amy and me, or to other attendees. I won't guarantee Amy and I will be on top of this all the time, but side conversations going on, that's fine. Webinars are a form of social media, so being social is naturally, in a workshop of this kind, encouraged. All nonprofit collecting institutions, whether they be museums, libraries, archives, historic sites, historical societies, have their required mission statements, and these statements almost invariably cover the activities of preserving and promotion. If you have collection items, you have a responsibility to both preserve and to share or to promote them with appropriate audiences. As an example, here's a representative mission statement that I've purloined here from the Warren County Historical Society in Queensbury, New York. And sure enough, here are the two key words in this one: promotion and preservation. That's our job as custodians of these collections, to see that we both preserve the items that we've collected and that we're diligent in sharing them, promoting them to our audiences. Now, most of the DHPSNY programs are focused on the preservation function. That's where our real expertise is here. But today's subject ventures a little outside of our main field, as our focus is on that promotion part, how we creatively disseminate information about our collections, or in the words of Thomas Hoving, who was the director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art back in the 1960s and 70s, and a person who is pretty well known for his skill in the art of promotion. The only way we're going to get this museum embedded in the public imagination and the public affection is to talk, 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 and proclaim, proclaim. Now, this isn't necessarily what dissemination is all about, what the sharing we do is all about. There is one side of the continuum. On one side of the continuum, there is passive dissemination, where you put the finding aid up on your website and researchers can always make an appointment to come and see the object. And on the other side of the continuum, there is proactive dissemination. And it's that proactive dissemination that Hoving was talking about here and what Amy and I are presenting today. We're talking about the active sharing, the art of intentional and focused promotion. And our emphasis here is on a very special kind of promotion that our institutions are uniquely positioned to excel at. And that's the art of object-based promotion. Your objects, your rare books, scrapbooks, letters, photographs, textiles, paintings, objects, every one of your objects has a story that can be teased out, and your institution is ideally positioned to do that work. Do people want to hear these stories? Well, take a look at recent bestsellers. You can just, go out to the Barnes & Noble and see what's on the shelves, and there you can find out that objects can tell the history of the world. They can tell the history of a country, the history of, there are lots of these books now, the history of a war, the history of a rock and roll band. They can even tell, this is one of my favorites, the history of the Doctor Who universe. And people love this type of approach to history, this type of approach to culture in general. They just hunger for the stories behind the objects. It's a bit like a behind-the-scenes tour where suddenly your institution comes alive. People can see things, have the privilege of seeing and hearing things that they weren't previously necessarily seeing before. When you do that talking, you're talking the stories that add a larger context to your collection. Say a local family donates the letters of a World War I veteran that you can share by putting his personal unique thoughts into the international context of the story of World War I. I've seen a lot of these lately connected with the anniversary, and it's always good to celebrate anniversaries. That adds extra interest, extra punch to the subject. By adding context like this, you're adding value to the objects in your collection, even adding value to the entire collection. You add value to one object, you add value to the entire collection, you even add value to your institution's reputation. Of course, the value was there all along. It's in the letters. It's inherent in the letters or the photographs, whatever you're presenting. But that value needs you to tease it out and talk it up so new audiences will realize the importance of what you've got. Two stories from history. First, the Gutenberg Bible, the first major printed book, perhaps the most famous rare book in the world, and widely acclaimed as one of the most beautiful, printed in the mid-1450s by Johann Gutenberg in Mainz. This is one of 4 in New York State that I have pictured here. All 4 are in New York City, 3 of them at the Morgan Library and Museum, and this one from the New York Public Library. So getting back to the Gutenberg story here, and I have a little slightly different angle than you usually get with it. We know the Gutenberg story. He came along, the whole movable type thing caught on pretty quickly, revolutionized the world, changing forever how we disseminate information, how we spread the word. But the Gutenberg Bible got lost in the shuffle. a neat equivalent is the way, much as you probably don't have a screen capture of your institution's first website. Well, we kind of lost the first book for a few centuries. You know, it just didn't seem important at that time to get that screen capture of the website, or to, oh, this is the first book, we should save it and label it as the first book. So it turned out that for more than 300 years following the publication in, approximately the mid-1450s of what we now know of as the Gutenberg Bible, nobody knew anything about the Gutenberg Bible. Amazingly, looking back on it, that's more than half the time the Gutenberg Bible has been in existence. The phrase Gutenberg Bible did not exist. The books themselves existed in various libraries, personal collections, among the very wealthy, usually royal collectors on the shelves of monasteries or university libraries. So the books were out there, but they weren't labeled yet. The value hadn't been added yet. It wasn't until 1763, and let's go from 1450 to 1763, or over 300 years. 1763 is closer to our present day than it is to 1450, believe it or not. In a library in Paris, Guillaume Francois de Bière identified and described a Gutenberg Bible for the first time, and then took it as his mission to proclaim it as the first book, to share this information. Until that point, for 300 years, they were just another book on the shelf. Somebody had to come along and point to it and say, this is important. The books existed, but value needed to be added. So that's the first story. The second story is a little bit more recent. For over 100 years, the book 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup was hidden in plain sight. It was very popular, and had a brief popularity in 1853 when it was first published, but then it just settled, as most books do, into obscurity until the 1960s, when there were two Louisiana historians working independently, Sue Aiken, pictured here, and Joseph Logsdon. They started looking at this book, thinking about what it meant, promoting its importance, its value, publishing about it, talking about it, proclaiming about it, and they were just insistent about this for 50 years. They worked this story all the way to 2013, when there was a movie made, which, people know this now. There was a movie made from it, won an Oscar for Best Picture, and in his acceptance speech, the director acknowledged Sue Aiken. You don't hear this much at the Oscars, where historians are publicly recognized. Acknowledged Sue Aiken, saying she gave her life's work to preserving Solomon's book, end quote. So there's that business again. That's what she was doing, preserving and sharing, work that goes naturally hand in hand and is a natural for collecting institutions to do. 12 Years a Slave, just another book on a shelf until Sue Aiken and Joseph Logsdon spread the word, telling audiences why it was important. That maybe it should be taught in schools. Hey, it might even make a good movie. Traditional news outlets, we're looking at the tools of the promotion trade. First, the old-fashioned print media. Newspapers, magazines, and journals, the fruits of Gutenberg's 15th century movable type innovation, alongside the now old-fashioned 20th century innovative technology of radio and television. This is the old paradigm of public relations through press release. Still valid today. We still practice that art, although most press releases are now sent by email. And even print media generally covers both the physical newspaper that you can hold in your hands and the digital version. That's what I'm showing here as an example. I've got the digital version of the newspaper article, the digital version available online. This one, an object-based story from the Fenton History Center in Jamestown, New York. Last of all, for the old ways, there's the internal self-publishing. work of the institution, the work that it does creating its own newsletters, its annual reports, other print publications that then are delivered by a real human being. It's the old-fashioned way, a postal carrier to your core community. But the world's changed. That was the old way, the traditional ways of doing things. We still use that as part of the whole menu, but a lot new has been added to the plate. So we enter the 21st century with our timeline on the bottom and the rapid development of a radically different marketing environment. Even though emails have technically been around for about 50 years at this point, everything really starts coming together just 20 years ago in 1995 when we see the first websites and systems put into place to manage the modern email systems. Message boards get introduced just 1999, that recently, not really that long ago. And then the really big one that I think this one has changed marketing. This is the one that really changes the way marketing done, and that's the introduction of Facebook in 2004. Probably the most powerful instrument for marketing we've ever seen in the world. Closely followed by YouTube in 2005. Just 12 years ago, when YouTube arrives, now it has enough material for you to watch for several centuries. Probably more than that. Twitter and Instagram complete our picture, both newbies on the block. When we look back in 50 years, what we're doing now will look like the primitive pioneer days of this technology. We're kind of in the incunabula stage for electronic media. So this is our modern suite of promotion and marketing tools, emails and variations, like e-newsletters, with an example from us on the side there, the Conservation Center's example of our email-friendly mini newsletter filled with lots of links. And we can work with Facebook, blogs, videos, podcasts, and Instagram, just to name a few of the huge menu of apps and opportunities available to us. Storytelling is the glue that binds community. A social media community being individuals brought together from all over the world who all buy into a shared narrative. If it's your community on your Facebook page, comprising all the people who've, in quotes, liked you, or in quotes, who follow you, these are the people who consciously include your organization and the work it does within their individual worldviews. This is your tribe. And the best way to communicate with your tribe is always through story. So where should you prioritize your efforts, especially if you're just starting out, if you're small? I used to have website at the top when I was presenting this 2 years ago, but am bowing to Amy on this one, who's, as I said at the very beginning, she's the one actually doing this work, and she suggested putting Facebook at #1. But ideally, it's not #1 and not the rest. Ideally, you'll be using at a minimum the top 3, with Facebook and emails promoting your work and your website functioning as your local, regional, your national. You should really consider it as your international presence. Even if you're just a historical society for a small village, this is your international presence and should be thought of that way. It's easy with most websites to include a blog that you can use for storytelling, sometimes just running it through the news feed. Videos and podcasts are fantastic. People love them, but they can be a bit hard to pull off, a bit challenging. If anything, videos can be a bit easier to make look professional, especially if you keep them very short. Podcasts are great and people love them, but they're singularly hard to pull off at a professional sounding level. The ear is a very sensitive instrument and can pick up on the low quality, and the brain, unfortunately, can be a bit judgmental when it hears that. Here at the center, we use the basics. We use Facebook, emails, and e-newsletters, and the website. And then from the rest, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. When we get an opportunity, maybe a video, but those opportunities don't come around too often. We've had a couple of times when we've had a person in-house who's been able to make a decent professional-looking video, and a couple of times we've had the opportunity to go outside, but it's not something we generally do. Podcast is something that DHPSNY is going to be venturing into soon, I believe. They're challenging as well. Hard to put together a good-sounding podcast and make it ultimately look easy. In a nutshell, at the most basic level, this is how we do it here. A Facebook post and our monthly emailed e-newsletter, which we just call e-news, announce that we have a story to share. They provide a short, punchy teaser that's supposed to pique your curiosity, to take you to our storytelling medium, which is a focus story operating on our blog. You've clicked the link and gone onto our website, onto the news feed, onto the blog, and you see the focus story on a treatment available. Each step along the path, you get a longer, fuller, richer story because you're evincing interest, bringing people in who want to know more. Our website blog offers the full story and links to a PDF in case you're interested in printing it out. But maybe instead of the blog, it could have linked to, say, an online exhibit. A Facebook teaser about the untold stories of African American slaves who lived in your community 200 years ago could lead you to an online exhibit on your website that highlights your collection of inventories, ledgers, bills of sale, runaway slave notices, and other ephemera. Here, a good model for you from an actual online exhibit, a collaboration of the Hudson River Valley Heritage and my friends out at historic Huguenot Street. I love online exhibitions like this. Here, this untold story exhibit seizes the opportunity to internationally share their objects that were previously unknown, the stories behind them previously untold, and potentially bringing these items to the attention of researchers all over the world, people who were probably unaware previously that material like this was available in New Paltz, New York. This is like textbook spreading the word. Blogs are still my favorite of the new storytelling media. I love this quote from the New York Public Library's website that offers this great image of the library as an iceberg, and it celebrates bloggers as storyteller adventurers. It's really a fantastic metaphor for our work. And the New York Public Library blogs in a big way, with around 50 blog channels, just capturing in this screen capture the very beginning of the list of all those 50 blog channels here. And then you can, click on something of particular interest, in my case, archives. They have archives out of the box. You click on that and you can get a story like this timely piece about the optics needed to view a total solar eclipse in 1878. Just a word of caution that when you're pulling together a blog entry or an online exhibition, do be cautious about respecting copyrights and getting any needed permissions. If you're looking at artwork or photographs from the 1920s on, read the fine print carefully. Most sites have them, to see what rights are being claimed and to see how to make proper attributions. It requires a little research, a little time. I'm a blogger myself, and I am always hunting for open access artwork that looks great and I can legally use. For example, when I did a series of pieces on one of my favorite books, I did a series on The Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. And, I knew going into that I couldn't use the classic 1950s artwork by Ilya Heuer because it's still under copyright. So I didn't use it. I do this for fun, so I wasn't able to pay to use it. So instead of using that artwork, I turned to open access sources, and I hit up the British Library's amazing online catalog of Hebrew illuminated manuscripts, all available for open access use. Many major collections have provided similar open access to many items in their collections, including the Getty, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Library of Congress, the National Gallery of Art. Many museums have gone this route, but others don't offer this sort of access. There are a number who don't offer this sort of access, so just be very careful when looking for appropriate artwork to share. And don't quote me on any of this either, because in the big disclaimer here, I'm not a lawyer, so this isn't legal advice. This is advice from a blogger. The next to last of my slides with some parting advice. Just go deep into your collections. Know the stories, love the stories. Be passionate about sharing them, because enthusiasm is contagious. Know a long and short version of the story. Tease with the short version on Facebook. Link to the long version on your website. It's all storytelling. The short one-sentence version and the longer version that you put up in your equivalent of our focus. Piggyback on current events. Think of your collection items in the context in all different types of contexts, in the context of the pop culture world. Look for connections with upcoming events and movies. Like if you're the Tesla Science Center at Wardenclyffe, you should be prepared for January's release of The Current War. So there's going to be a big movie about the Thomas Edison, George Westinghouse, Nikola Tesla brawl over AC/DC current. So real opportunity if you have science collections to just capitalize on what's going on in the world. It goes with movies, books, TV shows, music, any events that are fairly predictable. Say there's going to be a Winter Olympics coming up next year in Korea, or looking ahead to 2024. Yeah, there's going to be another eclipse. You can be ready, like the New York Public Library was, for the next one. These things are predictable, so always be thinking ahead. Join conversations. Social media is all about being social, so join the conversations at other sites, especially with ones that have material that's complementary to the material in your collections, and be complimentary of others and share freely about the great items in your collections, because you are trying to draw interest over to your site. Amy's going to be going more deeply into this next one, tapping into related communities. It's one of the best ways to grow your Facebook likes and your Instagram followers. And finally, a quote from one of my favorite movies, one of the great New York movies. And this is how I presented this in some workshops, so I have to explain. This is how I want you to look at this quote, to interpret it, to read it, from the perspective that I mentioned back at the beginning of this webinar, the perspective of leveling the field. Because even though you may not have an Everest of collecting, say a Gutenberg Bible in your collection, there may be, in fact, there almost certainly are, stories in your archive about something that may offhand appear commonplace. Commonplace like in the reference here, that old cigar store next door. But within that, there are stories held within the ephemera that could blow your mind with just as much suspense and grandeur as reaching the Everest summit. And we can most effectively share our collections with the world through objects-based promotion, by teasing these stories out, sharing them with the world, spreading the word. And now I'm going to be passing this over to Amy, who will take us deeper into the subject.
Hey, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Thank you. So, Lee's given you some frameworks for making your marketing decisions, and now I'm going to show you some examples from organizations who are getting the word out effectively. Each of the following bullet points is going to correspond to a couple of slides with case examples. So we will look at examples of institutions sharing their collections, tapping into their communities, tapping into broader communities, joining conversations, tracking initiatives with hashtags, and cross-posting their stories for maximum impact. Our first case example of an institution effectively sharing its collection is the American Antiquarian Society. Based in Worcester, Massachusetts, the Society is an independent research library which has collections ranging from books to newspapers to graphic art material through 1876. This is a shot. What we're looking at on the screen right now is a screenshot of the Society's Instagram feed. As you can see at the top of the screen, the Society has a staggering 32,000 Instagram followers. The vast majority of the posts on their account feature an item from the Society's collections, whether it's an artifact or a manuscript, with a brief description of the item. For example, this post from September of this year shows what's called a shaped book. The caption tells us that shaped books were popular in the mid-19th century, and they've chosen an interesting example to share here. This is a book about a young child who goes on a religious pilgrimage. It's visually striking and it's interesting. Here's another post from the Antiquarian Society. So if you tilt your head back and you squint a little bit, you'll see that the cursive script forms a portrait of Abraham Lincoln. And the caption goes on to say that this is a lithograph from 1865, and the cursive words form the Emancipation Proclamation in German. This is another example of a great collections post. The object is dated, identified, and a bit of background is given. Something to note about this photo, and most of the images we'll see on Instagram in particular, is that the photography is relatively simple. The great thing about taking photos of your collections, as opposed to trying to take compelling images of, say, events or things like that, is that collections are relatively easy to photograph. You should be able to take images of your objects using equipment as basic as a smartphone. Another great example of an institution publicizing its collection is the Archives and Special Collections of Thomas Jefferson University, a health sciences university and medical school in Philadelphia. The archives contain books, documents, photographs, and other items relating to the history of the almost 200-year-old institution and to scientific history more broadly. The team at their archives posts thoughtful and varied images of their collections. So, for instance, here is an image of a flag with a cross on it. The text of the post tells followers the history of the symbolism of the Red Cross, and it's a striking image. And here's a silly post. This is an example of a 1573 manuscript that suffered some colorful, shall we say, editing. Along with discussing the skirts, the post mentions the condition of the manuscript, saying that the paper hasn't been too damaged by the addition of the red pigment. You may have noticed that the posts we already looked at used hashtags. If used effectively and judiciously, hashtags are a fantastic way to make connections and tap into new communities, audiences, and followers. So now we'll look at some examples of that. First, we'll look at some examples of institutions tapping into their own community. So this will be libraries connecting with libraries, archives connecting with archives, and museums connecting with museums. These types of connections can strengthen your network and get your institution on the radar of other followers. So the first example has been used by a few of the posts we've looked at so far, including this one. So if an Instagram user were to tap or click on the hyperlink that says Libraries of Instagram right here, they would be taken to this screen. So this is showing us all of the Instagram posts that include hashtag Libraries of Instagram. Here we see an intersection of posts, some from book enthusiasts, many from institutions. The post in the middle, for instance, is from the New York Public Library. And that post is a great example of another one of these community-specific hashtags. This one is called Bookface Friday. It's pretty self-explanatory. Institutions fill out the covers of books with images of people or things. It's a fun way to connect to other institutions and get people to your account. Another great way to connect with your community is to get into what are called challenges, which are really just invitations to post relevant things from your collection around a certain theme. For example, this past August, many institutions posted images using the hashtag boats in the library. They posted a variety of images, whether they were illustrations, actual captain's logs, books related to boats, or, in the example in the top right corner, literally images of boats in the library. Challenges, or themed posts like these, are a great way to join in on a larger conversation. Other institutions can see and comment on your posts. Here's an example that uses both hashtag boats in the library and hashtag libraries of Instagram, and it is a pretty fabulous image. It comes from the Library Company, which is based in Philadelphia and has collections of rare books, ephemera, prints, and photographs from the 17th through 19th centuries. They posted an image of the floating Church of the Redeemer, which, according to the caption, was a floating Episcopal church built in 1849. You can also tap into broader communities using hashtags. On Tuesdays, many institutions and some individuals post images of typesetting using the hashtag TypeTuesday. A search for that tag on Instagram yields top results in a variety of fields. So we'll just go across the grid here. This first top left one is from an international brand design agency. This next one is from the Philadelphia Public Library's Rare Books Department. This one is from an Australian creative agency. This one is from the American Antiquarian Society, who we already saw a little bit of earlier today. This is from the Brigham Young University Idaho store, like the campus store for BYU Idaho. This is from an international graphic design education firm. This is from an international graphic design magazine. This is from an individual, but her profile says that she's a graphic designer and letterpress printer herself. And this last example is from the Denver Public Library. They have an Instagram account that posts images from the digital collections of Western history and the genealogy department. Using a hashtag like TypeTuesday gets your institution and your collections in front of a key demographic, audiences who, by virtue of searching via these hashtags, already have an interest in your material. Users who find your page through themed hashtags are more likely to peruse the rest of your posts. Weekly posts like this are great because they are likely to get more traffic. If lots of institutions are using a hashtag on one day, users are more likely to explore it. There's no obligation to participate every week, but you can certainly try or tune in when you get the chance. Hashtags can help you tap into even broader communities still. So here's an example from the Newberry Library, which is an independent research library in Chicago, whose collections include rare books, maps, music, manuscripts, and, as this image shows, some postcards. Their team chose to post this image on a Saturday to take advantage of hashtag Catterday, which is just what it sounds like. It's institutions and people posting images of cats on Saturdays. In this post, the Newberry is capitalizing on that trend and tapping into the thousands of people who peruse the hashtag every week. Here's another example. The Wagner Free Institute of Science in Philadelphia provides free science education, and along with their roster of educational program, they have some collections. They took Shark Week as an advantage to post some of their shark-related imagery, utilizing the Instagram function that allows you to post multiple images at once, which I'll just click through so you can see the other sharks. There's another one of the sharks they posted, and there's the other one. So far, the examples we've discussed have been on Instagram, but as Lee showed us with the timeline, before there was Instagram, there was Twitter. And now, while other social media platforms are seeing increased use these days, Twitter does remain a very effective way to carry out conversations with the public, and hashtags are useful here as well. September 13th of this year was International Ask a Curator Day, where institutions big and small invited constituents to tweet, Instagram, and post their questions for curators to Facebook. Many institutions first posted a very casual picture of the curator in her or his working environment. So, for example, the British Library posted this picture of their curator of North American published collections. She answered questions like the following one. So a user wrote, and you'll see the user's question is at the bottom of the screen. So the user's name is Mermaiden. And this user wrote, "Do you have anything connected to Laura Ingalls Wilder in the collection? I'd love to see one of her original manuscripts." And the curator responded with the tweet at the top of the screen saying, "We have lots of her books, including first editions of the series, published in the 1930s. Sadly, none of her manuscripts." So here we're seeing the British Library using hashtag Ask a Curator as an opportunity to discuss their collections. The Guggenheim introduced some of its curators with a video. So these curators then answered questions about their profession, like this one. It's an anecdote about working with Yoko Ono on an exhibit. And they also used it as an opportunity to promote their upcoming exhibition, which is called Art and China, which is in the news a bunch these days, so you've probably already heard of it. Another fun Ask a Curator thread from this year was at the Center for Meteorite Studies at Arizona State University. They posted this tweet, which says, "Pick a number between 1 and 1200 and we'll reply with what meteorite it is from our collection." So many people wrote in with suggested numbers. You can see here towards the bottom of the slide, user Gemma Davidson wrote in with 1066, and at the top of the slide is the Center for Meteorite Studies response. A short description of the meteorite with a link, which is here. If users click on that link, they're taken here to a page with more information about the meteorite. So what they're doing here is very smart because they're encouraging viewers to find the stories behind their collections objects, giving followers the reins to turn collections items from numbers to unique, interesting objects. Through this hashtag, the Center for Meteorite Studies wound up talking with other institutions as well. So the Amon Carter Museum, a museum of American art based in Fort Worth, Texas, which has about 21,000 Twitter followers, joined in on the conversation too. Another great use of hashtags comes from the Ohio History Connection, which uses hashtag OTD, which stands for On This Day, to highlight events and collections items related to Ohio history, like this one. On August 3rd, they posted this image with the hashtag On This Day in 1936, Ohio and Jesse Owens won gold in the 100-meter sprint at the Berlin Olympics. So here's another example from the Ohio History Connection. On April 29th, they wrote, "On this day in 1865, the funeral train for President Lincoln arrived in Columbus, his casket laid in the State House rotunda," with a link to an article which, if clicked, takes the user to the collections page for the photograph, which has more information on the item if you scroll down. You can also use hashtags to track your initiatives. We do this here at CCAHA. When I have an Instagram post that features a unique conservation-related tool, I'll add the hashtag CCAHA tools. If users search for or click on that hashtag, they'll see a curated feed of conservation tool-related images from CCAHA. There are some other examples of institutions organizing their posts in this way. The Library Company of Philadelphia, whom we already saw today, uses the hashtag LCP Prints when they post prints from their collections, as they do here in this post about Musk cologne. But these institution-specific tags don't have to be solely used internally by the institution. Many places use hashtags to track their exhibits. A recent example of this comes from the New York Historical Society and their Eloise at the Museum exhibit. Visitors and museum staff alike used the hashtag Eloise at NYHS to post about their experiences across multiple platforms, including Twitter. So here we have a tweet from the Historical Society. Here's a tweet from an outside entity that uses the hashtag. And here you can see the hashtag was also used on Instagram. So this is something that Lee spoke about before too. So several of the examples that we've looked at so far have featured links to other digital marketing streams. The Ohio History Connection had a link to the collections page of the image. The Center for Meteorite Studies linked out to external information, and so on. It's always a good idea to make sure you're cross-posting your content when you can, using whatever digital marketing streams you use. So if you write a blog article, for example, you should cross-post it to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So here's an example of the American Antiquarian Society doing just that on Instagram. In the spirit of back-to-school time, they wrote a blog post describing some of the items from their collections that could be used in school. They Instagrammed one of the images with a description encouraging visitors to check out the blog post. They also posted the blog post to their Facebook account. So here's a screenshot of that Facebook post. And both of these link to the blog post itself. So here's the kind of the top of the blog post. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some of the collections items that they profiled for the article. And here's our final case example. The Rhode Island School of Design Museum of Art publicized their participation in hashtag #AskACurator with this Facebook post encouraging followers to head over to Twitter and Instagram to follow along. So posting your content on all of your platforms ensures that your followers, wherever they are, know what you're up to. All right, so here we have our contact information. We're also going to really invite you to write in with any questions that you have right now in the chat box. And you should feel free to email either of us at any time. Our emails are listed here on this final slide. Looks like we have someone writing in.
I'm going to go ahead and take the headphones.
Okay, sure.
Hi, this is Lee again. As you're entering any questions for Amy or me, I wanted to start out with a question because Amy and I have done this several times together, and every time Amy presents it, there's an outstanding question that I want to ask, and so I'm both going to ask it and answer it this time. And this just shows my interest in things. Every time she goes through this, I'm like, well, where are the Laura Ingalls Wilder manuscripts? And the answer to that question is the two major collections of Laura Ingalls Wilder manuscripts are at the Laura Ingalls Wilder House and Museum in Mansfield, Missouri, and also at the Detroit Public Library. They are not digitized for online access, but they have been microfilmed, and a number of libraries, especially academic libraries around the country, do have access to them. Okay, that's my obsessions. Sorry, get all that. Do you use Hootsuite? That is a question for Amy, I know, because we have used it in the past.
Well, thank you, Lee, for that information. That I also wondered that when I was putting together this presentation. So Jacqueline wrote in and she said, do you use Hootsuite? I do not use Hootsuite at the center. I know that it is, so Hootsuite is an online tool that allows you to kind of organize and schedule your posts across multiple streams. So you can organize all your Facebook posts, your Instagram posts, your Twitter posts. I don't use it because I think that the scheduling the scheduling capabilities of Facebook and Twitter have really increased to the point that it's not useful for us, at least at the center, to use it. It also, I think, I looked it up the other day, and I think the baseline cost of it is about $20 a month, and I think it goes up from there. So it would definitely be something. It's no longer a free online tool. It doesn't make sense for us, but I know that people do often use it. Okay, so I see we have a question from Mary about whether or not a recording will be available. It will be. I think that you can email directly if you'd like it, and it will also be on the website. The website is DHPSNY.org, DHPSNY.org, and you can look at it there. Yeah, so I'm going to pass the headset back over to Lee, and Lee will answer Christine's question about how you create awareness and get followers.
This is Lee again. Just wanted to tackle this question, which is huge, and we could probably do another hour on how do you create awareness and get followers. The first question to ask is what kind of followers you want? What community is it that you want to build? Do you want to build do you want to be doing this in order to increase visitation? Do you want to do this in order to increase knowledge by, say, academic researchers and authors? So you do have to put in some thought to the type of audience that you're trying to reach, and that will determine the type of language that you're using as you go through all this. I mean, if it's a very small, tight community, you might actually be doing more emails, e-newsletters, especially for the academic world. You might be going more in that direction than Facebook, although I would include Facebook too. Like I said in the beginning, it is the most powerful marketing tool out there. It really does get out to a lot of people, including some pretty sophisticated people out there who are happy Facebook enthusiasts. So you're using a whole, I think Facebook's the best way to go, and I do think trying to get those emails trying to get the email addresses of the people that you want to reach. So if you're a research facility and you have researchers coming in, the goal there that you really want is to get their email addresses so you can be sharing with them. And I see Christine's typing some more here. I'm with the Small Historical Society and don't know how to find and connect with people not already connected to our museum. Try and figure out ways of getting those email addresses. Also, I do think, especially with the Small Historical Society, that a strong Facebook presence is very much worth the time. And I think I'm going to pass this back to Amy and put her on the spot, because this is the way with the Small Historical Society, you really do want that presence within the immediate local community. And therefore, you want to have the most engaging type of material possible for the Facebook followers. And don't think for a minute that Facebook is an older audience. It's a younger audience. It's not anymore. There's a huge range of ages of people using Facebook. So I'm going to pass on to Amy for the type of engaging content that might draw people in from the local town and get them talking and wanting to share your material.
Hi, Christine. Yeah, so I think everything that Lee said was totally spot on. You're going to want to make sure that your Facebook account has as much information about your historical society as possible. So you're going to want to make sure the address is right, your hours are right, you have contact information. You're going to want to make sure that you are monitoring any messages you get to that Facebook account. As far as what kind of content to put onto it, it's often, I think, good to do a mix. So you can do a mix of, posting interesting articles that are relevant to your historical society, as well as posting your own content, showing alerting your followers about any upcoming programs you have, any events, talking about your collections. Yeah, and you can use, this is a good place to tap into hashtags. So you can use, Throwback Thursday or, Type Tuesday like we discussed. Any of these, the hashtag on this day, hashtag OTD might be really good for you because you probably have a lot of local history dates that you can refer to. Yes.
I'm going to borrow and go a little bit further on this. This is Lee. We're still talking about Christine's question because I was just out at Northport Historical Society working on their strategic plan, and they have had astounding success with their latest exhibit, which is on veterans in their area who served in wars from, it seems to me they were starting with the Civil War up to the present. And with that, they just had the combination of using emails, e-newsletters, Facebook, and those events, because when you're in a local community, you're using these people to increase the visitation, to bring them out. But here they're actually talking about all the about people in the community, people who may have descendants in the community, people who may still be living in the community, and that's what people love to connect with. So I just wanted to mention they've had great success with their latest exhibition there, and I think it's kind of a model for how the small local historical societies can become a real active, vibrant member of their community. Now from Mary, we have the question, I'm also with a small historical society with a membership across the country. The membership is aging, and I've been leading the charge to get into the 21st century in order to attract younger members.
Hi, Mary. Yeah, so pretty much all of the above. I think the way you're going to get younger members is through social media, so through Facebook. If you have enough imagery and photos that you can start up an Instagram account, that can be a good way to connect. And I would also say for a younger audience to be pretty strategic about how many emails you're sending. I think in general, everybody these days is wanting fewer emails than they're getting in their inbox, right? I think that's especially true for younger members. So I would just, absolutely, email is such a vital component of any marketing plan, but I would just be careful about how often you're emailing. And I think that will make people, if you have fewer emails, but they're more content rich, people will pay more attention to them. So Peg says, have you found younger people are not using Facebook? Younger people are still using Facebook. Yeah, I think since its inception that the demographic has shifted to a more there are more middle-aged people on Facebook these days. I think it's still definitely something that's used by younger people, and I think it can be an effective way. Sometimes if I'm trying to figure out what the hours are for a restaurant or something like that, if you're trying to find contact information, sometimes the fastest way to do that is through Facebook. So even if younger people aren't as actively, really maintaining their profile page and doing posts, they still will go to Facebook as a way to get information because it's an interface that they're used to, as opposed to trying to figure out how to navigate everybody's different websites. I think, yeah, younger people, a lot of them are using Snapchat or other mediums. That's not something I would suggest for people like us, for cultural institutions, unless you have, a team of like 5 people on your digital marketing staff, which we certainly don't have. Snapchat is hard because it is so ephemeral. So you put a lot of time into something and it kind of immediately goes away. Let's see, any other questions? So yeah, Gabriella asked about the Snapchat geofilters. Those are helpful for getting the word out. Again, it's just a question of making sure you're not spreading yourself too thin. If you have the bandwidth to get into Snapchat, then that's absolutely a good way to do it. Yes, oh Sarah, this is perfect. Yes, I do think it's possible to spread yourself too thin across social media platforms. Yeah, I think it's possible to spread yourself too thin in terms of how much you're trying to maintain. And I think you make a good point about you want to make sure that the posts on your Twitter, on your Facebook, and on your Instagram are all writing in kind of different voices, making sure that you are speaking on the medium the way that people are used to reading it. Let's see, any other questions? Oh, here Carol's writing in.
Take one more from Carol.
Okay, Carol says, how do you figure out what voices are appropriate? Yeah, good question. I would look at what other people are doing, look at analogous institutions to your own, look at their social media presences, and see what you think works and what doesn't. I mean, there are obvious limitations. Twitter, you only have 180 characters. On Facebook and Instagram, you can write as many words, use as many characters as you want. But yeah, you'll just, even if you're cross-posting the same content, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, you'll just want to make sure that you're reformatting it each time to kind of fit in with that. I think the best way to do that is to see what other people are doing. Okay, looks like maybe we'll take one more question here. Any recommendations of print material about Facebook marketing? I think most of the guidance you're going to find about Facebook marketing is going to be online. Yeah. So Facebook itself has a pretty robust marketing section on the back end. So when you're on Facebook and you're kind of like logged in so that you're accessing your institutional, like, your kind of business profile, you should be able to find a bunch of resources there. A good resource that I like is called Capacity Interactive. Capacity Interactive is based in New York. They're based in New York City, and they do digital marketing for the arts. A lot of what they focus on is performing arts, nonprofits. So they'll talk a lot about kind of ticket sales and things like that might not be totally applicable to collecting institutions, but a lot of their advice I think can be useful. If you go to their website, there's a section called Ideas, and that's their blog, and you can search for relevant information there. All right. Well, I think we're going to sign off now. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. As we mentioned earlier, this webinar will be available online at DHPSNY.org in the resources page. Yep. So I hope you all have a great day, and please feel free to email and get in touch if you have any other questions. Okay. Thanks, everybody.